Hello, everyone, and welcome to Altitude 2021. This session is Do More with Less, leveraging automation across the entire user lifecycle. My name is Nicole Landau. I'm a senior product manager here at BetterCloud, and I've been working with IT professionals for 5 years now, supporting various goals, anything from on-prem implementations, evaluating SaaS stacks, and even for a short period of time, helping draft information governance policies for organizations who are actively moving to the cloud. So, the journey to SaaS has certainly taken the global stage, but I am very aware that it's a very personal journey for every organization and every IT member who may or may not be on this meeting today. And I'm excited to really jump into how we can better support those IT teams making that journey using BetterCloud. So, doing more with less, right? Bad things happen when you're doing more with less. Many of you have met my puppy Pepper on calls. I got her in 2021. She's one of those dogs you get when there's a pandemic and suddenly you're home way more often. But contrary to Pepper's desires, just because she showed up doesn't mean that extra hours appeared in my day to take her on walks or play with her or play tug or whatever the case may be. And the result of that is that she has interrupted many of my meetings with you, or she starts biting my feet during meetings or barking at the window incessantly, even when nothing is going on, or even like the dog in the picture, destroying the throw pillows on my couch. That started a couple of weeks ago. So that's very exciting. Now, that's a common issue, right? Doing more with less. The world of SaaS has absolutely exploded and expanded, but that doesn't mean that the IT team has grown at the same rate. Now, I'm not saying that your stakeholders are barking at the window or destroying your throw pillows or anything of the sort, but the impact is the same, right? There's suddenly this expectation that with the same number of hours in the day, you're going to get a lot more done, right? It's a problem that we're all feeling. And the question is, how do we do it, right? How do you magically do more with less? Now, this pressure on IT to do more with less comes from a couple of key sources, right? First is this increased priority on driving employee experience, right? There's all this talk about, how does an employee feel at the end of their first week? What's their experience? How do we retain our employees by having that intangible quality of experience be something that we say that we support better than anyone else? Right. So we know from chatting with you guys and polling the IT industry that on average, onboarding or offboarding can take 7 hours or more out of your day. We also know that 50% said that onboarding and offboarding was a crucial challenge to figure out in the next year. And we know that 37% said that prompt onboarding or offboarding was a super painful part of their week. Now, if your goal is to enable your new employees to get up and running and collaborating with their peers as quickly as possible in order to honor that, the highest employee experience that you can maintain, some of those factors and pain points are probably causing a lot of stress and taking a lot of time from your day. We also know that SaaS sprawl is getting way more difficult to manage, right? There's been a 38% increase in SaaS apps this year, and actually over 1,000% growth in the SaaS market since 2015. Over 1,000% growth. That's crazy. And we've heard from you that 54% of you agree that SaaS sprawl is absolutely challenging to manage. And that makes sense, right? Given that statistic. We also know that keeping the lights on is taking away from time you'd rather be spending on strategic initiatives, right? We polled the crowd and we heard that 82% said that over 20% of their week was spent on repetitive tasks, right? And a third of you said that 50% or more of your time was spent on those repetitive tasks. Now, I know from chatting with our internal IT team, they're wonderful, right? They're all over the SaaS community. They're leading best practices, creating podcasts, and they've said the same thing, right? They would love to spend even more time on those activities, but managing all of the stuff that comes from this explosion in SaaS is taking way more of their time than they would like. And then finally, manual processes, right? Just impacting efficiency and security, right? We know that 85% of breaches include a human element, right? People make mistakes all the time. We also know that only 45% of those SaaS processes are automated. So ideally, obviously, you'd have more automation to decrease the chance of a breach, but that's not really the pattern that we're seeing today. So let's talk about automation, right? Hopefully the answer to all of these woes is automating those manual processes and repetitive tasks in order to give time back, reduce error, all of those super important outcomes. And give you time to focus on being a best practices org within your company. And potentially give you time back to take the dog for a walk, or based on my conversations with many of you, just time for lunch on a regular basis. So when we talk about automation at BetterCloud, we're talking about getting as close to zero touch as possible with no code workflows, right? So automating actions based on queues or based on manual action that run through a series of steps so that you don't have to go do it in those native applications. If you've gone from one application to, I don't know, growth 1,000%, now you have 1,000 apps you're managing, you can't really keep up with going in and managing 1,000 different admin consoles. And that's where we really try and help, right? We've got our deep library of actions and alerts to help make sure that it's super easy to manage all of that from inside one single platform with BetterCloud. And we also offer best practices whenever we can, right? We've got template libraries to help get you up and running, as well as white papers, articles, and videos to really make it clear how you can find value and automate more of your day with BetterCloud. So let's talk about that in context. One of the most important factors to automate is user lifecycle management, right? We talked about the importance of employee experience and how that's become a bigger topic that we discuss as organizations. And there's a lot involved in that, right? There's obviously onboarding, right? When a user starts. And there's offboarding when a user leaves, right? Granting access and revoking access. But then there's also the really important middle piece, which is that mid-lifecycle management, right? Over, someone spends 10 years at an organization, their needs and their access rights change over time, right? And a lot of those requests land on the desk of IT to manage. So think about how much of your day is spent on managing your users throughout this life cycle. How much time is spent working with HR on getting somebody access to everything they need on day one, right? How much stress is created when an urgent offboarding hits your desk at 5 p.m. on a Friday? And how much just manual tasks are you doing on a regular basis for, add me to this application, add me to this group. Oh, my employee needs these 16 things, right? How much time, how much money, how much stress are you spending really on all the different manual and repetitive tasks and processes involved in the user lifecycle management process? So let's talk first about the offboarding process, right? How can automating that offboarding really make a difference for you and your team in a given week? So with BetterCloud, we can help you have automated, immediate offboarding across your entire SaaS stack, right? So we listen for cues from your source of truth, right? So maybe a user is set to inactive in Google, or maybe they're added to a group called deprovision, or maybe they're moved to an org unit called offboarding users, whatever the case may be. We can listen for those cues, and then we can apply additional filters such as what's their location, right? What's their department? What are the different factors that might dictate exactly which process this user needs to go through to be fully and completely offboarded from your system? From there, once the queue makes it through all of the filters, we can then take a series of actions, right? And we run through these as quickly as we can. We're using APIs to make sure that we are doing things with a sense of urgency and immediacy to do all kinds of things. Maybe we're resetting passwords or revoking access to various applications. Maybe we're disabling users. Maybe we're emailing managers or teammates, letting them know what's happened. All kinds of tasks that we can manage for you in various different native consoles in order to save time in your day, right? So not only are we making sure that we are giving time back by doing those manual repetitive tasks for you, we're also making sure that we are lowering risk, right, through human error. We're not going to mistype something. We're able to leverage rich context and reference fields from different parts of your workflow to make sure that we're using all of the information already present in those SaaS applications to ensure our workflows have the best, most up-to-date information at all times. So what that looks like in the product, right? I've got two images up on the screen. On the right, you've got what an offboarding workflow could look like. So you can see we've got when any user is suspended in Google, and then we have a series of steps that we can take. You can see that we've got that really rich workflow library that really has all kinds of different pre-baked, pre-created triggers, conditions, and actions to really get you started in building this workflow. And then on the left, you can see we also have templates, right? So these are pre-baked, we've created based on what we know as best practices in the industry, what steps we might recommend for an offboarding workflow. So as the PM for the automations team, I want to leave you with some considerations for when you're setting up your offboarding workflow. The first one is consider using on-demand for urgent cases, right? So we're talking about zero-touch IT, and that's the dream, that's the ideal, but zero-touch isn't always reality. Sometimes we have what I like to call one-touch IT. Maybe you don't want to wait for those triggers or cues to come in through our platform. You don't want to wait for somebody to make the change in your HR system or move someone to a group in Google. We do offer all of these workflows, what we call on demand, where you can just find the user in our directory and run the entire workflow against that user immediately with the click of a couple of buttons. Right. I'd also recommend checking out wait for duration. So this is a pause in your workflow that says, take these 5 steps, pause maybe for 7 days, and then take these other steps. This is really great if you want to either just pause after doing some of the revoke and reset password steps before doing some of the harder to undo steps like deleting an account. Or it also might be helpful if you have a legal hold, say, do all the offboarding steps, wait 30 days, and then transfer all of that user's documents to their manager. We also have a wait for approval step, which is similar to the wait for duration, except this time it pauses and it asks somebody else to let the workflow proceed or not, right? So this is a great way to involve other users at your organization. Maybe you want to take, most of your offboarding steps, but you want to leave that transfer documents until the very end. And maybe you want to ask the manager of that user, hey, the user's been offboarded. We're ready to transfer their documents to you unless you say that you don't want us to, right? Kind of gives them the opportunity to answer for themselves without you having to do the wild goose chase of gathering all of those different approvals outside of the platform. We also have notifications upon workflow completion, which really just sends a nice digest every time a workflow completes to your inbox. You can review, make sure you understand any steps that didn't complete. You can check on those approvals and even just have it for posterity, right? I can always go back to my inbox and get the record of when this workflow completed and all the action steps that were taken for this user. And then finally, the activity feed. This is a fairly new release for BetterCloud and is really just an easy way to see all of the workflows that are actively running in your environment. So if you are leveraging those wait for duration steps or wait for approval steps, it's an easy way to collect all those in one place so you can keep an eye on workflows that are running, or even what we call accelerate those workflows, right? By skipping the wait for duration step. Maybe you need to cancel that legal hold because something shady has happened and you want to make sure that you're doing that full deprovisioning as quickly as possible. Next, let's talk about mid-lifecycle management, right? Onboarding and offboarding is not all a user does during their time at your organization. Their role, their title, their department, all kinds of things might change that require some kind of response from you and your team to make sure they still have access to all the right things that they might need to keep collaborating at your organization. So let's take Chris as an example. Chris has been at the company for a year now. They've been doing such a killer job. Management cannot get enough of how wonderful Chris is. So they've decided to give Chris a promotion. So Chris moves to another department. Their title gets updated to manager in Workday. And all of this can be managed through those BetterCloud triggers and conditions, right? So we can listen for Chris having that department change and the role also changing to manager. And we can know that that means it's time to kick off a series of steps, right? Starting with changing that role to manager in Workday, securing the account in Azure AD or adding more secure privileges and more secure groups in Azure AD, maybe sharing more files in OneDrive SharePoint, providing access to additional Salesforce reports or adding a new role in Salesforce. And the same thing for Expensify, right? Maybe managers travel at your organization, so suddenly they need that account provisioned. Maybe you've got other secure things that only managers have access to that you could provision at this point, or other groups they need to be part of, like maybe manager groups or conversations in Slack versus Google or other areas of your organization. And maybe you want to remove access to some things, right? Maybe Chris was coming from your engineering organization and no longer needs access to Jira because now they're going to be managing folks rather than actually making changes to tickets or software. Now, we offer lots of great templates, again, to help get started with these mid-life cycle management use cases. Some other great examples that might happen during the time an employee is part of your organization. Again, those access requests might come up or might be part of that role change workflow. Maybe the name changes, right? Maybe they got married, maybe their last name changed, maybe they want to make sure that that's relevant and updated throughout their profile. Maybe it's their phone number or something else that may have changed. And maybe, again, they need access to additional files and folders to make sure, even though their role is changing, they can still collaborate effectively with all of their peers, or maybe the new team that they manage, or whatever the case may be. So some tips and tricks while you get started setting up these mid-life cycle management use cases. The first is checking out custom triggers. So this is a new release where we enable you to set up a push event from an external application that comes into BetterCloud and triggers a workflow. A great use case for mid-life cycle management is all of those fiddly requests that are currently coming in through your ITSM. Maybe you use Jira, maybe you use Freshservice, but not every access request, right? Like, I need this new application. That's not always associated with a role change or a title change. Maybe they just found a new tool they want to use. Maybe the organization started using a new SaaS application and people are hearing about it and asking for access, or whatever the case may be. You can actually configure from Jira, for example, anytime a ticket gets open that meets certain criteria, send a push event to BetterCloud. We receive that event. We can then actually condition or filter off of the information coming in from that ticket. If this field says Slack, we know it's a request for Slack access, and then we can proceed with the rest of the workflow. I would suggest adding approval steps in here as well. We talk about zero touch or one touch or low touch IT. Approval steps might enable you to fully remove yourself from that process altogether, right? Imagine, a Jira ticket gets opened that sends a push event to BetterCloud. BetterCloud kicks off a workflow that asks the user's manager if they agree that that user should have access to that tool. Bam, suddenly that's no longer something on your plate, and instead is getting redirected and decentralized to the people that you would otherwise be chasing down to find out what the actual decision point is there. And then finally, consider non-user-centric use cases, right? So yes, users go through all of these changes while at your organization, their needs change, their roles change, but other assets have a mid-life cycle also, right? You might open up a bunch of groups as part of some org structure. You might have a bunch of Slack channels for projects that are suddenly really old, and now they have no members, right? Or there's no one, interacting with different assets as part of your organization. We have other automations that we can use to help make sure not only do your users have exactly what they need and only what they need, but that your assets are also in that good, clean state across various SaaS applications. All right, next, let's talk about onboarding workflows with BetterCloud, right? So automation for onboarding is incredibly important. Onboarding often includes a bunch of steps to make sure somebody has all of the access and entitlements that they need on their very first day. It's a lot of time that IT is spending that could otherwise be automated, right? As well as lowering risk through automating that process. We're making sure that we're pulling the right names from the right places, reducing typos, and hopefully making sure that that user has every single item they need on their very first day at the organization. So let's look at what that looks like. Again, BetterCloud is focused on offering this, no or low code, IT-centric, scalable automation. You've got that same capability to listen for cues from maybe your HR system or something else, as well as running that workflow on demand. We hope you leverage industry best practices using our templates. And we hope that you use our dynamic fields, right, to leverage context from different applications to make sure you're mapping all those fields and really getting that rich context, getting names right, getting emails right, mapping managers from your HR system into other platforms to really help make sure that you're managing not just one SaaS application, but that one user across hundreds of SaaS applications. Some guidance for when you're setting up those onboarding workflows. Again, take a look at custom triggers. We always try and have all of the cues that you're going to need, but we are not growing 1,000% integrations per year, right? So we can't keep up with that either. So we always want to make sure that we're offering those developer tools directly to you guys to make sure that you can key off of, again, whether it's your ITSM or something else, or even an internally grown system that offers that API push event functionality. Also take a look at custom actions, right? We have, I think it's like over 800 now actions in our action library, but that might not cover everything you need. Again, even including homegrown applications. We have the ability for you to set up those custom push actions from our platform into whatever third-party application you may need. Again, look at waiting for approval, right? For onboarding, maybe you have everyone getting one set of entitlements and then a subset of users that might get additional granting to Salesforce or Tableau. Data tools are a great example of one with limited licensing. Maybe you want to do most of your onboarding for everyone, and then you want the last 20% to be a set of steps that the manager has to approve before proceeding. And then finally, in a similar concept, maybe consider having one master onboarding workflow that runs for every single user that starts at your organization, and then some secondary workflows that run maybe per location or per department, so that you can tailor a little bit more carefully, maybe what the product managers get versus the sales engineers versus the software engineers versus the support specialists get, right? So all these different personas might get a slightly more tailored onboarding experience that way. This is our newsletter that we offer for customers. It's got tons of great information, both about recent releases, also things that we hear in the industry, new white papers, new things that come out that we want to make sure people know about. I also urge you to check out the SaaSops community. It's a great way to also keep up with BetterCloud, as well as just see what our awesome community is up to. We get great conversation happening in the community. People share ideas, they share problem statements, people give advice on how to tackle different problems that folks might be facing. We also have support.bettercloud.com with all kinds of articles on different pieces of our platform, as well as the most obvious, which is resources.bettercloud.com. This has pretty much everything from white papers to how-tos to links to everything else I mentioned on this slide. So as you walk away from this session, take a day with your team, evaluate your day-to-day tasks and processes, and make a checklist. Think through which of those you'd like to automate, right? Think about where you're spending time that could be better spent doing something else. Explore BetterCloud templates, see what ideas that might spark, see what opportunities might be instantly implementable to really get you started on taking advantage of more of these use cases. And check out custom triggers, right? Maybe you thought, oh, BetterCloud can't support XYZ. Check out custom triggers and actions. We might have enabled you to do that one thing that you really wanted to be able to do to really manage that workflow all the way from beginning, all the way to the very end, right? And then other than that, I'm going to say thank you very much for spending some time with me today. Please stick around for the next sessions. Take advantage of the free BetterCloud certification prep. And again, thank you so much for your time today. I look forward to chatting with all of you further. Thanks so much.